I don't know about you, but I think Chicago is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. I mean, think about it. To its delicious aroma of Chicago style pizza, to the museums that add to its culture, to Navy Pier that brings excitement to many, and to its skyscrapers that bring pride into the city. But even with all these very convincing characteristics, there is still one attribute that I neglected to conclude, and this would be O'Hare Airport. Now, you may be asking, what could an airport possibly do for the city than just transport people? This is a valid question that will be answered by the time this video is done. But allow me to ask, why would you think an airport could not do more for a city than just transporting people? And what is wrong with just transporting people? O'Hare International Airport is one of the biggest airports in the world and welcomes millions of people every single year. With people come money, the possibility of new ideas, and people that will add to the greatness, which is Chicago. But once again, I'm getting ahead of myself. So allow me to backtrack all the way to when Chicago was considering building a second airport. In 1926, Municipal Airport, which is modern-day Midway, opened in Chicago's southwest side, and it did not take long for the city to realize that if it wanted to keep up with the growth of commercial aviation, it was going to need more space. Throughout the 1930s, the city looked for locations for a second airport, but not much progress was made until the beginning of World War II. During the war, inland defense production facilities became a priority, and the Army Air Corps was soon in Chicago looking for a site where the Douglas aircraft could produce its C-54 Skymaster transport aircraft. After looking through many sites, the American Army decided to settle on Orchard Place, due to it being 18 miles from downtown Chicago and being in a place that was well connected to the rail lines and also plenty of space for the factory plant and the company airfield. Construction started immediately, and by the time the war ended, the base produced 655 C-54s at the Orchard factory plant. But now the economic development in question, Chicago soon returned to the same question of how to increase commercial aviation capabilities. With the projection of increased traffic for Midway, the problem for a new airport became a necessity. So, in 1945, Chicago's mayor, Martin Kennedy, established an aviation board with the mission of finding and building a suitable place for the new airport. In the end, Orchard Fields was chosen due to the cost and other considerations seemed too unsafe to start construction. Chicago hired Ralph H. Burke, the man who designed Mages Field and the Chicago subway, to design the master plan for Orchard Airport. Burke envisioned a big airport to when the final stage was complete would include 10 runways and a massive terminal complex to handle millions of passengers and visitors every single year. After talking with his crew members, Burke decided on a design called the split finger plan, as it would allow for a lot of terminal activity and would allow for future expansion. While Burke presented a plan, it was up to the city to find funds in order to make it a reality. Now, while the government secured the land, it was more difficult to ask for additional funds, and the state of Illinois was not exactly helping that much either, as the check written for construction was less than that which was promised. In 1949, though there was competing names, Mayor Kennedy signed an ordinance officially naming the airport in honor of World War II naval aviator Edward Butch O'Hare. The airport became O'Hare Field, Chicago International Airport. But as 1950 approached, the airport was underfunded, underutilized, and issues with the design were cropping up. Much of the decade was spent redesigning the airport, dealing with neighbors both inside and outside the airport fence, and convincing the airlines to move traffic from Midway. The plans for the airport had to be redesigned due to the fact that jet age created more issues than were first expected due to that jets required bigger and longer runways. To accommodate the growth of the airport, the city had to deal with its suburban neighbors. So, the city purchased 5,000 acres of land. But suburbans began to believe that the city was encroaching farther into the suburbs. So, in March of 1956, the Chicago City Council voted unanimously to annex O'Hare, making it officially part of Chicago. O'Hare's neighbors on the inside were a problem as well, as the U.S. Air Force was planning on taking the airport as a permanent base. But due to the resistance of state officials and the mayor, all but the defense squadron were removed as soon as possible to a new base that was built in the Chicago area. But O'Hare was facing an even bigger problem, which was the lack of commercial traffic. In May 1955, a deal was made with Midway in order to secure the equal distribution of traffic to both airports. O'Hare Field Chicago International Airport officially opened for business on October 30th, 1955. For the next few years, O'Hare was a stage of constant remodeling due to the transoceanic planes that were coming in and due to the amount of people that O'Hare was receiving. O'Hare went from 100,000 to 5 million people in a matter of years. Also, because international traffic was becoming an important part of O'Hare's growth, in 1955, the city officially renamed the airport Chicago O'Hare International. With the transfer of traffic from Midway, passengers were brought to O'Hare faster than the airport could comfortably suit them. In 1961, over 9.6 million passengers made their way through the airport, which was a facility that was not yet finished. But by 1962, most renovations were complete, and by that time of 1963, many would hardly be able to recognize it from when it first opened. Countless improvements to the runways, taxiways, and terminals had grown O'Hare to the biggest airport in the world. If the 1940s and 50s were spent bringing passengers and airlines to O'Hare, the remainder of the 20th century was spent making sure there was a place to put them. Before anyone knew it, O'Hare was passing Midway in the number of traffic it was having, with 533,000 movements compared to 4,500 movements from Midway in 1966. Also, with the addition of dedicated international terminal in 1963, it allowed Chicago to truly claim the name Chicago O'Hare International Airport. The next big innovation that occurred, other than small expansion on the airport, was in 1984, when Chicago completed its long-planned extension of the CTA Blue Line train to O'Hare from downtown. Before, if passengers wanted to go to O'Hare via public transportation, many would have to take an express bus from Jefferson Park Station. But now many can use the regular subway to O'Hare, freeing a lot of wasted time. As the 20th century rolls by, political banter was delaying expansion due to conflicting ideas of whether or not O'Hare should start planning for the future that was planned to come. At the turn of the 21st century, everyone agreed that something needed to be done about the delays at O'Hare. With proposals being presented, one after another, after many disputes, Mayor Richard Daley presented the O'Hare Modernization Program that would be the gateway for brand new construction at O'Hare. But the global economic downturn almost brought the O'Hare Modernization Project to a halt in January 2011, when the United States and Americans sued to stop the project. The argument of whether or not further construction is up for debate, as O'Hare has seen a decrease in the amount of traffic they have seen in the past. But in nearly 60 years that O'Hare has been around, the billions and trillions of dollars in revenue it has brought to the city, along with the people and ideas, cannot truly be comprehended.